So Chlorella vulgaris works as a powerful biostimulant, which means that it encourages the natural processes of nutrient cycling and soil microbe activity in our soil and to stimulate plant growth. So this is not a fertilizer. We are not adding any nutrients to the system. We are just stimulating and encouraging microbes to do the work that they are meant to do in the soil to accelerate the growth of our plants and make them more nutrient dense. So there are four main mechanisms that we know of for how the algae works. And I'm going to show you this through an infographic, but I'll just name the four right here before we go into that. So first, EnSoil Algae stimulates and grows microbial population and diversity in the soil. Second, the algae increases plant nutrient uptake and improves overall plant health. Third, algae enhances the chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is that green pigment that you see in plants and improves the photosynthetic capacity. And then fourth, EnSoil Algae increases plant tolerance to stress and soil water retention capacity. So I'm going to go into more detail across all four of these as you're looking at a visual guide. So this infographic shows two sides, one with synthetic NPK fertilizer and one with EnSoil Algae. This is just to have a comparison point. So we're going to start on the right side, and if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to go bottom to top from the bottom right-hand corner. So first, when you apply EnSoil Algae to your plant, it's got roots in the ground, there's sunlight shining, it happens to be pink today. The EnSoil application stimulates the growth of your microbial population and diversity. So what happens is the microbial population grows in quantity, but also in diversity of species. And it's important to note that when you have a really healthy community of microbes in the ground, you're able to reduce your dependence on synthetic nutrients from fertilizer. And this is one of multiple ways that EnSoil Algae increases your return on investment. You're saving money on those expensive fertilizer costs. Second, as we move up the right side, bacteria are fixing or converting atmospheric nitrogen into a usable form for plants. So when you have this healthy microbial community, you have these soil bacteria that can help do this. And what happens is your plant is able to have more energy and more nutrients, and it can show better nutrient values in things like plant tissue analyses, which we have tested with EnSoil and have found that both macro and micronutrients in the crops treated with EnSoil are improved. Third, when EnSoil Algae is applied, the chlorophyll, again, that green pigment, is enhanced and the plant can photosynthesize more efficiently. So the plants take in carbon dioxide. When they photosynthesize, they are able to draw that carbon into the ground and more carbon is released through the roots into the soil. Lastly, at the top of the right-hand side, EnSoil increases plant tolerance to stress, and it actually optimizes soil conditions to tolerate stress such as drought or salinity. The way that this works is it stimulates the plant to release some enzymes, these chemicals that help the plant survive the changes in conditions. And with regard to the soil water retention capacity, you can think about the soil as a habitat, as a home for all of these microbes. And the microbes build structure. They build little walls and little habitats in the soil. And when you have more structure, you don't have as much erosion or as much runoff. So your soil is actually able to retain more moisture. And because EnSoil is attracting this strong community of microbes, there you get your water retention capacity and plant tolerance. So now I'm going to just compare this to a situation where you're using a synthetic fertilizer. For those of you that don't know what NPK stands for, this is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Synthetic fertilizers are chemically produced nutrients that you are adding to the system. So we're going to continue to go with the example of nitrogen on this side, but we'll follow from the top left down to the bottom left. So when you add nitrogen, synthetic nitrogen, to the soil, it's inaccessible to the plants without this strong soil community of your microbes. So the plant is not really able to use it to grow, and it needs its help from these microbes to convert it into a usable form. What happens is the nitrogen gets loose in the soil. So as you can see in the image, there's all of this loose nitrogen. And when it's not stored somewhere in the plant or in the bacteria, it's more likely to contaminate water systems and run off into drinking water and the local watershed. Some of it will also return to the atmosphere and as nitrogen gas. So all of this excess soil nitrogen makes the conditions unlivable for microbes. And what happens is the soil turns from this really abundant, living, vibrant ecosystem to something that's dead. If any of you have ever heard the from soil to dirt, this is what we're talking about here. We're killing off these organisms that are really helpful in our system by introducing a chemical form of nutrients. So what happens is after the plant nutrients are used up, or they've run out of the soil and water, or they've moved into the atmosphere, the plants need new nutrients to grow. And this turns into a cycle where they now require an additional treatment of synthetic fertilizer, which costs more money and more time to apply. So what I'm showing here is that with synthetic fertilizer, you are adding more money, there are high costs, and you're really taking a toll on those soil microbes. So at EnSoil, at Enlightened Soil Corps, we recommend a transition away from these synthetic chemical fertilizers through an introduction of algae. We completely understand that many growers are relying on fertilizer for their crop yield, and we encourage you to add this biology to your system to keep the crop yield high and also to increase your return on investment as you transition away from your chemicals. So if you have any questions about this infographic or any of the mechanism information that I've talked about here, please take a note of it or type it in the Q&A right now, and we will return to that after Ray speaks. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Ray Archuleta, and he will talk a little bit about how EnSoil can drive change in the regenerative sector. But Yaz is going to start with a quick question for Ray.
Okay, Ray, I got a question. How did you get introduced to Enlightened Soil / EnSoil Algae?
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Yazzie and Camille, for having me, and welcome the virtual group. I always love talking to people face to face, but we're not going to be able to do that. So thank you for showing up. It really says a lot about the group because, one, I always know when people want to learn. One, it's when they're willing to put up their time, and two, they're willing to put up their money. So you can always tell those type of people set themselves apart. So thank you for showing up, all of you. And back to Yazzie, what got me started? Well, I got 4 reasons. I wrote them down, Yazzie. First, Russell Hedrick. Some of you may know that Russell Hedrick is, well, he's a friend of mine. I've known him for quite a long time. In fact, when he was starting his journey down regenerative agriculture, I lived in North Carolina, and I was one of the agronomists at the tech center in North Carolina, located in Greensboro. And I'll never forget, I got a phone call from Russell Hedrick, and we started to visit, and we really hit it off. But I quickly noticed that this young man who started agriculture, he actually started his career as a fireman and a diesel mechanic, but he's probably one of the most brilliant agriculturist farmers that I've exposed to. And so we've built this really long relationship, and it's been a wonderful journey. And my journey with EnSoil started when Russell, him and I talk quite often, and he told me, well, when all of you know, if you don't know, Russell's the corn champion of North America, and he just won that. And how did he do that? And he did it by no-till, which, by the way, is not supposed to work, cover crops, which are not supposed to work, and managing his nutrients. Oh, and by the way, also the Haney test, which is junk science, which reduced his fertility, and he did it with 40% less fertilizer. And the reason I bring these things up, because I was one of the ones that spread the Haney soil test all over the country, because I knew that our soil recommendations were erroneous and they were wrong. And so that's the journey I started with EnSoil, because Russell was absolutely impressed with, well, he does no-till, he does cover crops, and he manages his nitrogen, like Yazzie and Camille talked about, lowering a systems approach, lowering his fertility, just polluting the right amount of fertilizer. Because we have to remember, these are salts, and salts are not really in high concentrations is not natural in natural ecosystems, especially soil ecosystems, and using biologicals like EnSoil. And Russell would absolutely brag about it. And if you know anything about Russell, he's fastidious. He's with the details and doing the research and doing the demonstrations, which I have a hard time getting farmers and ranchers to do. But he does it judiciously. So that's how I started with that. And then also, I love the approach. Biological approach is kind of, if you're involved in homeopathy or naturopathy, the soil and the body work very similar. And my wife suffered quite a long time with autoimmune issues. And that's why the typical doctor, modern medicine, can't address it, because it can't handle it with chronic diseases very well. Well, a lot of producers don't realize that our soils are chronically sick. They have been absolutely destroyed, hundreds and hundreds of years of tillage and over fertilization, over manure, poor rotations, not enough carbon, and not enough capturing a liquid sun, and not enough carbon cycling. But the paradigm, the approach, approaching the soil with the right molecules, like Camille and Yazzie talked about, using the right molecules. It's like biomimicry, using natural medicine, because the body will heal itself if you give it the right nutrients and it knows what to do with it. Same thing with EnSoil and some of these biological products. This natural system knows what to do with them. And the last one, I like the attitude of the people that we're dealing with. The Yazzie, Camille, Meredith, all the staff, they're very passionate. And we have this one thing, we all have this thing, we want to heal the land, but we also want to heal the checkbook of the rancher and farmer, that they're regenerative, that they can pass the next generation, the farm and ranch, to the next generation. And that includes if they don't have to use EnSoil anymore once their soils are healthy. And we really believe that. And that's why I got involved. So thank you, Yazzie, for setting it up. And we'll open up to the group, whatever they want to talk about.
Thank you, Ray. If you would just take a couple more minutes to talk about how EnSoil can drive change in the regenerative sector, maybe 2 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for questions at 7:30.
And give me a little bit about in reference to what, because that's such a broad statement. I mean, regenerative soils can heal all biological communities and deal with everything from climate to human health to animal health to, I mean, where do we want to start?
Let's give a hypothetical of someone who has been a grower for a while and is looking to transition to more regenerative practices. How can EnSoil play a role in their transition or their trajectory?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for being more specific, because look, first thing I do is when I consult all over the world, when I got back I just got back from Guatemala, consulting on 50,000 acres of sugarcane. And once I started to walk the fields and saw what was going on, and it's typical everywhere from Brazil, Venezuela, Guatemala. I just got back from there 4 months ago. Same thing. Soils are degraded, over-tilled, over-fertilized. And so the way I look at going to no-till and cover crops and EnSoil is kind of like gives it a jump start, so the healing process starts to heal very quickly. And so when you do a systems approach, EnSoil is an incredible part of the mechanism to start the healing process. Again, like my wife, she's taking biologicals for her body, and we're starting to see a change. That's the same way I look at EnSoil on how we can come and start the healing process in very, very degraded systems. And that's how I approach it.
Thanks, Ray. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate your wisdom as always. So we're now going to open up for questions and answers. It is 7:30. We want to respect your time, so we will finish